either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And Chris, what is that in the sky? It's a bright, red, most annoying sound in the world.
It is. Insert screeching demon noise here.
I couldn't find a sound effect for it, so...
That's understandable.
Yeah.
We're talking about Rudolph.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Happy Christmas!
We are in the Christmas time frame. Actually, yes, it is December 1st.
Today is the first day of my advent calendar.
Yeah, there's that. I have quite a few things to say about the Christmas holiday lately.
Which is fair. I like Christmas, but I only like Christmas from December 1st to January 1st. And then after that, fuck Christmas.
Not mid-September, because...
No, I'm not a mid-September lover. Mostly because my two favorite holidays are usually completely dwarfed by the Christmas problem.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I totally get it. Like, people love Christmas. This has been a hard year. And Christmas brings people joy, even if it's just decorating and pretending like they're gonna have, Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
I get it, but also stop shitting on the holidays.
No, and I feel you there. Like, I get it. My mom has a friend who he's posting and doing stuff in July for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous to me.
Oh, for sure. But at the same time, we do have, as grumpy Grinches, we have to accept we are now in December.
Yeah.
And now is the time, if we're going to watch these Christmas specials, now is the time to do so.
Yes.
So we're going to start off with the longest running Christmas special of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the TV special. And to be a little bit more specific, because we'll go into this later, we're doing the 1998 to 2004 cut of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Because there were multiple cuts. And so, your grandparents might remember songs and scenes that you don't see. And going forward, there might be songs and bits that aren't in our version.
Okay.
So just as a heads up, there are, for some reason, multiple versions of this movie.
Yeah, for run times and whatnot. So.
It's mostly commercials.
Yeah. And, Chris, what are we drinking today?
Only the most perfect of Christmas drinks ever. Hot cocoa.
Yes, with oat milk.
Oat milk, because I can't have cow milk.
And I'm learning I can't either.
Welcome to the club.
We'll see. It's chocolate. I couldn't find white chocolate, so I'm a bit annoyed.
Yeah, I understand.
So, cheers.
OT.
Yeah.
But I like it.
It's fine. It's not as chocolatey as that beer your husband tried to convince me
had
no chocolate in it.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with his taste.
He said that, and then he immediately took a sip of it. He's like, oh yeah, there's a lot in there.
That's because I explained it to him as espresso, and once you tell him something, it is in his brain.
It was so gross. For those who don't know, I do not like chocolate, so...
Not even a little bit.
This is fine, but it's not... It's like Tootsie Roll chocolate.
Yeah, this is the powdered Nestle stuff it's just powdered sugar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So... Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Mm-hmm.
It originally aired as a television special, so this is actually our first made-for-TV movie, technically.
It is.
And it was first aired on Sunday, December 6th, 1964 on NBC in the United States, and it was sponsored by General Electric under their General Electric Fantasy Hour.
Which, for those of you who aren't into old-timey shit like I am, it's not... It's a new concept for stuff to not be, blatantly produced by companies. And by companies that you don't necessarily associate with TV.
Yeah.
So, for General Electrics, it kind of makes sense in our nowadays brains, but, some of my favorite TV shows were sponsored by wine companies. Mm-hmm. Several were by cigarette companies. I mean, honestly, if you were a big enough company, it was kind of your job to provide some sort of entertainment to, as advertisement.
Yeah, well, this is back when TVs were relatively new.
Yes.
I actually had a call with my parents after watching this just because this is such a piece of American history. I wanted to know their thoughts and what things were like back then. Mm-hmm. And, back then, most people only had one TV, and it was like the big
there was
cabinetry.
A hunkin' TV.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like, yeah, there was, like, family-friendly, so it was mostly family-friendly stuff, and then, like, the news. But, yeah, you just kind of got to watch whatever was on. There wasn't, like, a huge variety. And Rudolph, the Christmas special, was kind of unique in that it was one of the first made-for-TV Christmas movies.
Yes.
So,
this shaped and defined holiday specials.
Yeah, so there was a couple of, like, TV shows that had their own Christmas episode.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't terribly uncommon. It was pretty new, but, like, you kind of expected at least a nod to Christmas at least once in a really big TV show, or at least a long-running one. But nobody was making movies specifically for holidays. Yeah. At least not yet.
And I'm not super familiar with holiday movies outside horror films, which, by the way, I did listen to or re-listen to our What Makes a Christmas Movie episode today.
Yes.
I did remember the Naked Old Men movie.
Yes.
And the Krampus. I watched it later that year. It's called Rare Exports.
Oh, there you go.
And also we talked about this in our next two movies in that same episode.
And this really did define Christmas movies. And, like, in not just, like, the claymation and family sort of way, but as in, like, you should have a new movie come out for Christmas.
Yeah. And this is also, you also have to kind of get in a mindset of how defining this was, because at the time there was 3 channels. And even though nowadays it's shown it's shown multiple times throughout the year.
Yeah.
This used to have, like, one day that they'd show it, and that was it.
Yeah, and it wasn't like nowadays where, like, now I think Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is shown, like, once a day at least on the big broadcasting. And then even then, like, you might see Rudolph for, like, 4 times in a row. It wasn't quite the same. Like, if you were lucky, after this had gotten popular, it might be on twice. Yeah. Once in the morning and once in the evening, if you were lucky, and that was, like, way down the road. Yeah,
and as you mentioned, this is the longest-running Christmas TV special. It's been running at least once a year since 1964.
Yep.
And it reached its 50th anniversary in 2014.
It did. And since then, like I said, it's gone through a couple of small iterations. Mostly things like, when it came out, commercials weren't as big a thing, because the company who sponsored it was the commercial.
Yeah.
So as TV and how TV is consumed changed, so did this movie, which is kind of an interesting look at, like, consumerism in a way, especially for TV and something that is considered free TV.
Yeah.
So it got whittled down quite a lot throughout the years because they needed to add room for commercials for the broadcasting companies. And then there was also a couple of arguments on, like, how often it can be shown. If we shorten it, it can be shown more.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there was a point where you can also see, like, they would whittle it down and then feedback would come out and they'd say, no, we didn't like that you removed this song. We want it back in. And so they would. They put it back in.
Yeah, it's like early cuts of films where they get to a test audience and they tweak things here and there based off the scorecards.
Exactly. And so Rudolph went through some tweaking. And so there are earlier versions where, like, example, the song Couple of Misfits is replaced with a different song. Not groundbreaking, but I mean, that's kind of the earworm for me for this movie.
Okay.
And so, like, there were bits that were changed throughout the years. The version we see now, or at least the one you're probably most familiar with, does have most of the original stuff in it. And then also, like, the longest version of itself.
Yeah, because I think if I remember right, like, the original runtime was like 40-something minutes, and the cut we're reviewing is like 55 minutes or something like that.
Yeah. And there was also some changes made because the original companies who owned this, licensed this, worked on this, some of them went through name changes, so they had to find a way to change the intro cards.
Yeah.
And so that's why we now have the kind of slideshow-esque beginning with the Christmas trees and the boxes and stuff showing who everyone's name is, because at one point they were like, this isn't who we are anymore. Someone change it.
Yeah, because it was originally under, like, television or something, even though it was part of Rankin Bass.
Exactly.
Which many people that listen to us will know us talking about Rankin Bass many times from Godzilla and King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Yeah, but we're also going to get into a little bit different side of Rankin Bass on this one, because the specifically the animation studios who worked on the Christmas specials,
Mm-hmm.
didn't just do Rudolph. They did most of the ones that you know.
Yes, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But as we know, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, it actually has been aired on CBS since 1972. And it was one of the biggest changes I could see was it was digitally remastered and put into high definition in 2005.
Which, granted, I like how they did this remastering. I'm not a huge fan of, like, updating old movies. I think it looks bad 90% of the time. There's a couple of times where things are brightened up so you can see dark places, but Rudolph didn't have that problem from the beginning.
Exactly. Or if it's like an old film that Criterion's restoring from the early days of cinema where they're removing or they're filling in tears or removing the graininess to bring it back up to and dust. Yeah.
So that's the kind of restoration that I don't usually mind, and sometimes I do enjoy, but we've seen kind of a big wave in the last, I almost want to say 30 years or so, where people feel like they need to go back to classics and touch them. Yeah. We've seen a lot of this with Disney, touching their old hand-drawn stuff, and you see it most with things like Cinderella and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where they've almost, like, they've removed whole sections of character and flattened them out. They've removed line work. They've removed color palettes. This one doesn't quite suffer as badly from the retouching up. Mostly because, thankfully, this isn't hand-drawn most of the time. There's a couple of spots where you could argue there's hand stuff going on. Yeah. But it's mostly claymation, so it's all, actual footage that we have. So it getting touched up mostly just feels more claymation-y as opposed to, like, removing bits.
Yeah, or George Lucas adding weird CGI into spots that are, like...
Not necessary, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this one doesn't look bad, but... To be very straightforward, the best way to watch this is on a smaller TV that is a little bit grainy.
Yeah, and not your husband's stupid frame rate fixing bullshit.
Yeah, if you have one of those TVs like my husband and I do, where it, like, adds in frames to make things look smoother, it's mostly good for, like, video games.
Yeah.
Like, if you're into Call of Duty, which that's why we have this TV, then yeah, it looks really nice and, like, it makes you feel like it's a smoother game despite it not doing jack shit.
There's a little bit of resentment in your tone there.
Plus so many hours of television to Call of Duty.
And now probably Shadow of or Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, but now I have 2 Nintendo products that, like, I can hold and play. Like, people who keep bashing the Switch and the, like, what was the other one called?
The DS?
The DS, and then what was the one right before the Switch? I have it.
The Wii U.
The Wii U. People who keep dissing the Wii U, stop it. This is the only way I get to play video games anymore. I refuse to buy a second TV. Like, no. I strive to live as an old person in the new modern year.
Oh, same here. I have I even talked to my parents about this a little bit. I have no desire to have a TV in my bedroom.
But now that my husband has gotten into watching older movies with me, it's really very apparent because, like, our TV color auto changes for us, it fills in frames for us, and it also, like, auto corrects, like, spots on the TV for us. So, like, that really didn't help this movie, but I have seen this movie on, like, newer TVs. Like, my parents' TV doesn't do that. It's huge. It still doesn't look as good as it does if you can get it on a nice smaller screen. Yeah,
or like one of the old tube televisions.
Honestly, that's all I want.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's how we're at a weird age because we, for the most part, grew up with the old tube televisions.
Oh, for sure.
Plasma screens were kind of new, so...
And even then, they were kind of the smaller, dinkier ones. Like, yeah, if you were lucky, you had a big one, but, like, it wasn't that big.
Yeah, or, like, mine's from, like, 2003, and it's still
a chunker.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so
yeah, if you're gonna watch this movie, the DVD version is the prime way to go, and we do recommend trying to watch it on not the newest television that you can get your hands on.
Yeah,
but it's not the worst.
Exactly. And so before we get into the movie, I being a history nerd.
Yeah.
But also wanting to explore the origins of a classic piece of American iconography.
See, you say all this. In reality, we all know that you have a thing for trying to find German and Japanese connections with movies. And this movie kind of manages to do both.
That, but not really. Like, I've been getting into just like the origins of certain things. Like
Fair.
we both watch Taste of History,
I love
where he gets into the origins of food.
Yes.
And I love that stuff. Like that stuff's interesting to me. Like,
oh, it is. It's terribly interesting. And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is kind of weird if you think about him.
yeah, no, exactly. And that's why I started going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, because like we know where Santa Claus and all this comes from. I knew Rudolph was a marketing campaign, but I didn't realize where it started. And so
Sure.
I wanted to go into that a little bit because most people our age won't know this because it actually originates from before our parents, too.
Oh, sure. And I think most people grew up with just this version of Rudolph. I don't think there was a whole lot of other options of Rudolph.
No.
And if there were, they were based off of this one.
Exactly. And so this movie is based off the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer by Johnny Marks, which is in turn based on a poem by his brother-in-law, Robert L. May, that was written in 1939.
Yep. Nice and early.
Yeah. It's a weird little spin-off because
Yeah, it kind of has the same vibes as like the poem slash short story of Santa Claus.
The Night Before Christmas.
Yeah, The Night Before Christmas.
Yeah, it actually was written in iambic pentameter in the same manner of it. But the poem actually first appeared in a 1939 booklet that was published by the department store Montgomery Ward, which I did a little bit more reading into them because
I was gonna say you might find them interesting.
Again, a rabbit hole, and that's a whole other thing.
They are. That's a different topic.
Not important, but after I did my little bit of reading, because I'd never heard about Montgomery Ward before, I learned that they were one of America's largest department chains that ran from 1872 to 2001.
Yeah, department stores have evolved so much over the years, and if you get your chance, there's a bunch of really great books, and I think even a couple of, if not documentary style videos about department stores and department malls, because what we think of now is not what they used to be, but it kind of is. In this weird sort of like fusioned way. They are, but at the same time they're not. Interesting stuff. Not quite gonna spend an hour on it here, though.
No, exactly. It has no relation to movies. Unless we did, like, whenever we do Dawn of the Dead or Mallrats.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, this poem was commissioned by Montgomery Ward in an attempt to save money on their annual Christmas coloring books that they gave away every year.
Sure.
So, kind of a weird origin story to...
Yeah, but now that you know that he came from, like, a poem, similar to the ones that we're still hanging around, still familiar with, you can see it. You can see it really well, especially in this TV special. And this is something that was praised for not just Rudolph, but most of their shorts and TV specials in general, was they would start with either a song or a book or a poem, and they would inject it so heavily into the plot and into the dialogue that while it didn't quite feel like you're reading pages out of the book, but you can still directly see, and if you know the source material, you can kind of pick out the spots where you're like, aha, that's why you said that line.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, the story is actually based off of May's childhood experience because he was treated very much like Rudolph was when he was younger, and the fact that his daughter liked reindeer. As well, his idea for the glowing nose came from one day when May was looking out of his downtown Chicago office, just trying to think of something to bring it special other than a normal nosed reindeer like in Animal Crossing. He was looking out the window over Lake Michigan, and his view was blocked by a thick fog that popped into his mind a bright red nose with like a spotlight that just cut through the fog. Yeah.
So, it's all cute. And now that you know that it's this little story, Rudolph's weird deformity that he should have gone and seen a doctor for when he was born makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, well, and also we've seen a change in American viewpoint. Oh, sure. And it might be partly because of how this movie has changed certain things, but the idea of the bright red nose was originally rejected because in the 30s it was associated with pop culture, alcoholism, and drunkardness. Which
you can still kind of see, especially if you're into like the older cartoons like Popeye and stuff, and even some of the old like New York Times comic strips, that's pretty prevalent way of, like, deterring if someone's drunk or not, is they're usually drawn with, like, a beet red nose.
Yeah. Which
then I think kind of got turned into, like, a jolly sort of thing, because there was later on... Because later on, Santa Claus, even before the Hallmark version that we know him as, like, was still described as having rosy red cheeks and a
nose like a cherry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which is now how we think about it, but, like, the idea of a flushed red face and a red nose does bring about, now I think, the idea about, like, warmth and jolliness and, like, being out in the cold.
'Twas the Night Before Christmas is just a story about their drunk uncle just stumbling around the house.
Trying to put up Christmas lights.
Yes. Yay. Ruining Christmas traditions. But anywho, so May asked his friend Denver Gillian, who was an illustrator who worked for Montgomery Ward, to draw cute reindeer, which helped him convince the Montgomery Ward to publish it. Which
I think is a really clever way of doing it, because if you're a creative mindset, it's pretty easy for you to, like, imagine a cutesy version of things that aren't cute.
Yeah.
Because, like, reindeer are fairly cute. But they are not, like, child-selling cute in the 30s. Teddy bears were, like, the standard of cute back then.
Yeah.
Like, baby dolls, teddy bears, little toy planes, classical toys. So the idea of, like, a hunkin' moose, not as easily, like, thought of, I think.
No, I get it. I mean,
it was clever of him to think to do it.
Yeah. And so, in the first year, Montgomery Ward published 2.4 million copies of the story.
Damn, son.
Yeah. And then, the first mass market editions were published in 1947 by Maxton Brooks, as well as a sequel in 1954 called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Shines Again.
I remember the sequel very briefly, and I mean, it's a part of history if you want to try and dig it up and look at it.
I don't.
It's not necessary.
Yeah, and I don't think May actually wrote it because
no, I don't think so.
Later on in 1947, Applewood Books published a previously unpublished sequel that May had written, called Rudolph's Second Christmas.
Which is now considered, like, the third one in the Rudolph arc. But Rudolph is very much suffering from the whole, like, who started it and can we copyright him faster than the guy who owns it?
Yeah. And I mean, it's the 30s, so...
It is the 30s, where it's the Wild West of...
copyright laws.
Just about everything.
Yeah. And so, as well, the song is a little bit different than the poem, because it does... The beginning of the song, so you know, Prancer, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it adds all the deer.
That was actually a paraphrase of The Night Before Christmas, a poem actually called A Visit from St. Nicholas.
Adorable.
And I learned that poem was published in 1823.
Like I said, you know, people have loved Christmas for a hella long time.
Yeah. A long time.
A long-ass time.
And that version of the song was actually... originally sung by an old crooner named Harry Brannon in New York City radio in early November of 1949. But I couldn't find his copy of it. The one that we know of is sung by Gene Autry, who
you guys know that one. Don't worry.
Fun fact about that version of it: it became the #1 hit on the U.S. charts during the Christmas of the same year.
I mean, it's a classic.
He originally rejected the song because it was supposed to be a B-side for a record, but his wife convinced him to use it. It also holds the distinction of the first #1 song of the 1950s.
Aw, look at it go.
It also is the first one to hit #1 charts for the week, and then the next week completely drop off.
It is a Christmas song.
Exactly.
I mean, Mariah Carey knows best, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so, how Rankin Bass came into the fold for this. Now, finally, to the movie stuff. I mean, I just wanted to go over that and touch that, because I feel the history of Rudolph is a bit lost to people, especially our age and younger.
Yeah, we very much take Rudolph for granted.
Yeah.
It's just always on.
Exactly. So Rankin Bass had previously done work with General Electric on a few commercials, as well as a television series called The New Adventures of Pinocchio.
Which, if you haven't seen, it is less terrifying than the live-action Pinocchio, but not as cute as the Disney version.
Yeah, it's a very maybe not even Schoolhouse Rock. Like, what? Oh,
there's Bankin' and Razz has a style, and once you've watched a couple of their stuff, it's pretty easy to pick it out. Everything's very cartoony, very doll toy-esque, and then at the same time, everything moves. Nothing is made, like, I think a lot of claymation and stop-motion animation now is either trying to push what that form can do, or they're trying to make it incredibly convincing and realistic.
Yeah.
Especially with, like, walking and talking and hands and eye face movements.
Yeah, like, Kubo and the Two Strings.
Is a great example. That whole studio is honestly a great example of, like, some stellar claymation work.
Yeah.
But, like you point out, like, Kubo, the amount of facial expressions, like, we see them go through dozens, if not, up to 50 different faces for a character just to have the right expressions. Franklin Bass did not have. No, that was not a thing they did.
Yeah.
Everything feels choppy, everything feels doll-like because, the eyes don't move as much, if at all.
Yeah,
like, there's not a lot of blinking going on.
Yeah, they, for the most part, had, like, one model that they were working with.
Yeah, and this is also before, like, there's a lot of, like, extra bits to the model nowadays that we think are kind of standard, like having a wire body or having a removable face head or multiple heads for the same character, and they're usually all sculpted from clay, maybe with a wire aperture or some metal underneath.
Yeah, these are very rigid.
Yeah, there's a lot of theirs were made out of wood.
Yeah,
which we don't do anymore. That's just not, because it doesn't look natural. But like, that's kind of their style, and they just owned it, and that's how you, like, it all feels very toy-esque, but it works.
Yeah, it's their very classic animagic style.
Yes, that's what they called it.
Yes. Well, I mean, they were the only ones doing this at that time, too.
Yeah, they were. And even though there were other, like, shorts and maybe even some, like, TV shows that featured claymation and stop motion before, they were the only ones, like, truly trying to, like, keep it going, like, make more.
Yeah.
Because this stuff does take a very long time to do, even if you outsource to a faster...
Yeah, it's like that, it's like that part in, Parks and Rec, where he's like, oh, I've been sitting here, I've been doing this animation all week.
Yeah.
And he shows them what he's done, and it's like 3 seconds.
Yeah. That's very realistic. And so this stuff takes a long time. And so Franklin and Bass were also kind of the only people pushing this to go faster and to, like, create more than just the one movie. Or we're kind of used to seeing, like, a studio develop maybe 4 or 5 films over a couple decades.
Yeah.
They were like, let's go. Let's roll them out, guys.
Yeah. And I'll get into that a little bit because that's part of their, process in making the film.
Yeah.
But real quick before we get into that, the teleplay was written by Romeo Mueller, who introduced new characters who weren't added because he could not find a copy of the book.
Which is adorable, because I think later on he was quoted as saying, like, I kind of wish I had gotten around to it, but I liked what I did.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when we talk about adaptations and people wanting it to be exactly like the book.
Yeah, this is a wonderful example of, like, nobody bothered to read the source material.
Yeah.
But, like, it worked out in the end, mostly because I think, the source material was a poem, which is easy to, like, add more to. Because it's kind of up to your imagination, really. And then at the same time, I think, especially for, like, it wasn't very long. I mean, it was long for when it came out, but even by then, even by their standards, like, this is pretty cut and dry. There's not a whole lot of filler. Yeah. Anything. There's not even filler seconds in this movie.
No, and that's the thing that's impressive about this movie too, is it tells such a broad but condensed story in 55 minutes.
Yeah.
We've seen movies that take that and spread it over 2 hours.
I've seen a movie that does that over, 3.
Yeah.
3 movies. 8 hours worth of footage. And yeah, this
Hobbit.
I'm not saying anything.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Don't get me wrong, I love that movie very, very dearly. It's one of my favorites ever. Don't know if all of that was necessary.
No. That's for another episode.
We will get to it. But yeah, they managed to not only add characters, they didn't just tell the story of Rudolph. They managed to tell a bunch of side characters' stories all at the same time. And there's not any, like, filler, there's no fluff, there's no, like, scenes that don't have some actual importance to somebody's story.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, like, I'm just walking through the snow to get to my friend's house sort of thing.
For me, it's like Notting Hill.
Yeah.
Where that movie is so well put together and so concise.
And I think that's kind of why this is still the classic that it is. Not just because it's cute and nostalgia, but because it's really well written.
Yeah. And so, on top of that, all the voice actors, besides Burl Ives, are Canadian because...
It's cheaper.
Well, cheaper, but apparently American radio dramas has ended a few years before that point.
Yeah, they had fallen out of fashion.
But Canada was still producing them, and Rankin Bass had previously outsourced to Canada when they were trying to stretch their budget for Tales of the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, which ended up working out well because American audiences still recognized a lot of these actors' names. And so even though they weren't the big calling card, that was definitely Burr, but people still knew who they were, so it wasn't like they were going to be tuning into a claymation, what looked like a kid's show for Christmas.
Yeah.
For people that, like, didn't, like, no one put big names to animation voice acting back then.
Yeah.
This was kind of the first one that really got people excited to watch a voice acting because of the voice, not just because it looked like a cool movie.
Yeah. Well, and as for Burl Ives, his character was added shortly before the end of production. And all this happened because NBC and General Electric wanted to have a familiar name to the cast.
Yes.
Instead of a bunch of no names, which, again...
Yeah.
It's the personality that you're tuning in for.
Definitely. And Burr wasn't just some actor. This guy was crazy popular. He had multiple really successful radio shows. He was a stylistic successful singer. Country, did I can't remember what the original one he started off with, but he sang a whole bunch. He was on TV a lot. He was in multiple movies, and he wasn't just like that guy who was on a bunch of stuff. He was kind of like the host of a lot of it.
Yeah, my mom tried getting me into him when we were younger, but the only song I remember is Gumdrop Candy Mountain.
Fair. And I think a lot of people nowadays will probably remember him from his performances in The Big Country. I think he won awards for that performance. If you like Westerns, that's a great classic.
Okay.
And then he's also on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which, again, if you're into classics, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we'll
get to Cat on a Hot Tin Roof one of these days.
Okay, yeah, As you've previously stated, I'm more into classic German and Japanese films than I am American.
And I am secretly 160 years old.
But, so this inclusion of Burl Ives would actually lead to the tradition of Rankin Bass animations usually featuring one big name and the rest being no names.
Yeah, a good example is Santa Claus is Coming to Town. The mailman from that, during his day, the voice was someone that everyone would have tuned in for.
Yeah. Fun fact about that movie, it's the first depiction of Mrs. Claus as a young woman. And
honestly, I really like her. We'll get into that one later, because we will have Santa Claus eventually, don't worry.
Yeah.
But, like, that is by far the most prime Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus example, I think, still to date.
Yeah. And so, part of what made Rankin Bass's work schedule, or their production process work so well, is they would create storyboards and give directions of what they wanted to happen with the models weeks before shooting.
Yes.
And so the concept and designs and storyboards were actually done by Arthur Rankin Jr. And his staff in New York City, while the animation, as we previously mentioned, was known as Animagic, which was trademarked by them.
Of course.
Was filmed at MOM Productions in Tokyo.
Yes.
And was supervised by Tadahito Mochinaga and Associate Director Kizo Nagashima.
And if you are a total nerd like we are, you might recognize those names from films as like My Neighbor Totoro. No. A lot of these people did go on to work with Ghibli. Well, and that was one of the films that, maybe them not specifically, but several of the people who worked on this did go on to help out with.
Yeah, well, these two would actually work with Rankin and Bass up until that monster one you told me about. We watched Mad Monster Party.
Yeah, an adorable Halloween classic.
Yeah. And so the reason they outsourced to Japan is because they could produce high-quality animation at a cheap cost.
Yes.
Again, this is budget TV specials at their finest.
So budgety. So budgety, in fact, that maybe we didn't bother to pay the Canadian voice actors all the time.
Or well enough.
First off, they weren't paid nearly as well as if they had been American actors, because they were in Canada, and so they got swindled.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, because they were Canadian actors, by law, they weren't at the time required to give them, like if they, when it was
royalties.
Royalties. So when it was played in the future, out of all of the actors who were Canadian, I think they got like $1,000 total over like a 3-year run.
Yeah, something like that.
Whereas
Burl Ives collected royalties throughout his entire life for this.
I think his estate might still be collecting royalties for this.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And this was a sore spot for the actors, and I think even Burr had commented on it that he didn't like it, but all of them enjoyed working on the film, so no one... And at the time, like, it was kind of understood that, like, we should have looked for this, we should have kind of known, and we didn't think it was going to be this big. Yeah. But it kind of is sucky, especially now, knowing that this movie's made, like, over $1 million over the years.
Yeah, and we'll go into that in a little bit more towards the end of the episode, just because there's a lot to the legacy of this
there is.
movie.
But it does kind of crack me up, because nowadays we specifically think of, like, these fast budget movies. They're usually straight to DVD. They're usually absolute shit. And they're usually, like, for children and nobody else. Like, I'm looking at you, Land Before Time 10.
Yeah.
And so the fact that this movie was, and all of their movies really, were made the same mindset, but managed to become classics and watched year after year after year, even their less popular ones. Yeah. Like, that's really weird and crazy.
Yeah, and well, I mean, the thing is for me is I didn't know that this was animated by a Japanese studio until I was watching interviews on the DVD.
Most people don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Most people think of this as the most Americana piece of, like, Christmas that you can get. Like, how more Christmassy can you get than, like, Rudolph in most people's minds? But yeah. And there's a good example of if you do want to break it down, there are scenes where you can see the Japanese influence in some of the design choices, choices.
There's one scene, I think, in the St. Nicholas one where she's looking into a pond of water and
anime.
Yeah, exactly. Straight up like Daft Punk looking anime.
It's some 70s anime right there. But, like, that's the thing is, like, and we saw that a little bit with Disney at some points was influenced by it, and people were making the argument that, like, Disney's face and eyes and, like, mouth were starting to get anime. And it wasn't until, like, years after those had all come out that people started noticing it, because anime wasn't a thing. Japanese animation wasn't a thing. So, like, you had to be one hell of a nerd to notice this back in the day. Yeah.
As well, the relationship between Mochinaga and Nagashima and Rankin and Bass actually began with The New Adventures of Pinocchio. Yes. And which started between 1960 and 1961. And like I previously mentioned, ended with Mad Monster Party in 1967. Yes. So 7-year run, not bad.
Yeah, honestly not that bad for an odd arts studio that they really didn't think this was going to go well. Like, to the point where when they were done with the puppets, they just kind of got rid of them. Yeah. Like, we're down to 2 puppets.
Yeah, I'll go into that a little later on.
But, like, that's how you know you don't think this is going to go anywhere, is if you don't keep the puppets.
Yes. And one other little side note, Machinaga's other claim to fame is that he was the only major artist of the era that worked in both Chinese and Japanese animation, as
Very
well
impressive.
as popularized stop animation in China.
Yeah, which... very impressive.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we have about the production of the movie because most of the people involved have long since passed.
And like we said, no one thought this was going to be this popular and run this long, so no one thought to write any of this down or have an interview with these people.
Yeah, exactly. I think the last person his interview was in like 2004, 2007 before he died. Yeah. Yeah. And so... into the movie breakdown we go. Yes. So, the movie starts off with Burl Ives' snowman, Sam. Yes. Waddling his way through the snow.
And this is important for one specific reason. The snow that he's pushing with his body is incredibly specific to this production studio, to the point where there's a team trying to like recreate and kind of reimagine, but they still want to like keep it the same, and they had to work real hard to get something even close to this snow.
Yes. And so we're immediately told that Christmas was previously in trouble, because all this movie is a flashback.
Oh yeah, all this movie is a flashback to a time where there was a real bad snowstorm around the whole world, apparently. And during that horrible snowstorm, that was when the main part of this movie takes place, but like flashback to the time when Rudolph was born.
Yeah.
This movie's actual timeline really doesn't make a ton of sense, but like no one cares.
Yeah. And so we're started off by Sam kind of talking down on us of, how dare you not know who Rudolph is?
How do you not know who this guy is? And also, how do you not know what Christmas Town is?
The most famous reindeer of all.
And then it just kind of busts into the song.
Yes. And so with the opening, we have the credits rolling through snow and trees.
This is the part that got changed over the years, at least at the beginning, to fit when people's names changed as far as like company name changes.
Yeah. And so, little side note here, Rankin Bass at this time was the only group doing original scores for animated features. Even Disney at this time had stopped.
Yeah, there was a amount of time, and a lot of us remember this time very distinctly in the Disney movies, where it's not that it wasn't a thing that people could do, it just wasn't popular.
Yeah.
It wasn't seen as very economical. No one felt that the original songs really elevated the movie at all, and if anything, it kind of made it harder to sell a movie because there's not that song that you already know and love to kind of like bring you into the movie.
Yeah, and
whereas now it's more like, hey, that famous person does a song for our movie.
Yeah.
So it's still an original song, but like they're not making it. This famous person is.
Yeah. Okay. And so we get back into we get a quick flashback to Donner becoming a father.
Important time in a adult deer's life, going to have a family. Child is born, and immediately Donner is horrified by his son's disgusting, shrieking nose.
Yes, and even like Santa Claus is...
Even Santa Claus is like, what the frick is that thing?
I love Santa Claus in this because he is a asshole.
He is. He's such a dick.
He is the biggest dick.
And he's not just a dick to Rudolph, because the story is kind of set up for people to be a dick to Rudolph. That's kind of the whole point of this movie. And the song and the poem. No, Santa's just a dick to everyone. He's a dick to his wife. He's a dick to the elves during song practice. He's just an asshole. I admire this Santa. This Santa's horrible. His wife's a gem. I love her, but Santa's a dick.
Yes. So I also had like a weird little stupid thought in my head. I want a horror take on this, where Rudolph is that one backwoods child that they keep in the cellar.
Like Hills Have Eyes type of thing.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, he kind of was, though.
Yeah.
This just happens that, like, instead of dying in the islet of misfit toys and being mauled to death by them, he saves them and everyone has a happy year.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of the same plot, only it's done in cute animation.
Yes. There's a horrible part later that I will talk a little bit about.
Fair.
Side note about the voice actress for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Originally released as Billy Mae Richards, or in the original release, Billy Mae Richards was credited as Billy Richards because Rankin and Bass didn't want people to know that Rudolph was voiced by a woman.
And now, like, every child on the planet is voiced by women, regardless of whether or not you're a dude.
Yeah.
Like, children just are voiced by girls, and that's just how it is. And no one cares. I think a lot of people's favorite voice actors are women voice actors, because they can do a lot. The range is a lot more.
And it's also, I think it's easier for women to do that just because naturally their voices are higher than men's.
Yeah.
And for men to do it, it can put them into a falsetto and sounds weird.
Yeah.
The only one that I know that really probably pulls it off still is Haley Joel Osment as Sora.
Oh, yeah, sure. But I think for women voice actors in general, it's easy to try and have that big range, because for women to do even if you're not a natural soprano, to put on a falsetto doesn't sound super weird.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing voice acting and not like actual singing. So there's a huge range there, and people just don't care, and it's just kind of part of the scene now that a lot of voice actors are women, but not back then.
Yeah, exactly. So we get our first big jingle song.
Yes, it's jingly. It's jangly.
It's fine.
It's fine.
I honestly don't... The songs in this movie for me aren't memorable.
The songs in this movie, yeah, they're not as catchy as I think a lot of other Christmas songs have become.
Yeah.
Especially now. I think nowadays the whole like thing with Christmas songs is that they are so catchy you physically cannot forget them, and that's kind of like the whole genre for the most part, which is why I like the really old Christmas songs, because ain't nobody remember those because they're not catchy. They're just okay. And this movie has a lot of just okay songs, but especially if you watch this like I did for 29 years straight, 12 days a year, almost every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, this song's not my favorite, but there are definitely ones in this that, like, they're still running in my head.
Yeah.
I cannot get rid of them.
Silver and Gold's not a bad one.
Silver and Gold's not a bad one. The Misfits song, whether or not you like it, doesn't matter. It's going to be stuck in your head for at least a few hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just Jingle, Jingle, Jingle is not one of them.
Nope. And so at this point, Rudolph is going to be hidden away while his father teaches him how to do reindeer shit, like avoid the abominable monster of the north.
Did you notice that his father is terrible at hiding? Because I did. His dad's antlers are sticking way out from behind that log.
Yeah. I mean, they could be trees.
Little sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rudolph, I mean, this is also kind of like... I think when it was originally out, like, no one really, like, thought too much about the whole, like, Rudolph situation. This was just, like, a cute thing that came on and you kind of went on with your day. And now that Rudolph is so ingrained in culture, I think a lot of people have had time in their whole lives to think about, like, how fucked up it is that Rudolph grew up by himself in a cave where his dad spent his entire time teaching him how to, like, be a man.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I feel sorry. Rudolph's lucky he turned out normal. At all.
Again, I need a horror rendition of this.
It's gotta be out there somewhere.
So, one other thing to note before we get further into it, is that the simplicity of the sets and the environments was actually, as we mentioned earlier, was determined by the size of the television screen.
Yeah, which is part of the reason why now if you watch it on one of those ones that stretches your screen real weird, you can feel a little weird.
It's like watching some of those very minimalist... Well, I can't really call them minimalist because it's like what they had at the time. Like, some of the sets remind me of like some of the interior shots of Die Nibelungen.
Yes.
And
yeah,
old German silent films.
Well, and a lot of it was like they were trying to trick the camera to make something look bigger by specifically filming and setting a place a certain way. And now that our TVs can actually go the distance, you're like, wow, this hallway's real empty.
Yeah.
Why is it so big?
Yeah.
It's not.
It just was the size.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we're also introduced to Herbie.
I love Herbie, but I also hate Herbie.
Herbie is a psychopath.
Herbie is, in fact, a psychopath.
I will get into that later.
Herbie is an elf who doesn't feel like he is an actual elf because he wants to be a dentist.
Well, and all the other elves are dicks to him because, like, it's, how dare you not want to do Santa's bidding?
Yeah, and at the same time, we're also kind of given the implication that Herbie's, like, keeping everyone else from being the, like, true elf self they can be.
Yeah.
He's keeping everyone from doing their work correctly. He's stalling. He's making new toys that nobody has time for.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Herbie isn't very good with, like, being like, I understand that I don't fit in. Can I maybe work somewhere else?
Yeah.
Herbie's just like, fuck you guys, I quit.
Yeah, exactly. And also we got back to the plot of Donner to hide that his son is a red-nosed freak.
Just puts dirt on his face.
Puts a cap on his nose, which...
It's not plastic.
It makes me think of, like the first person to have, like, a red-headed child.
Quick,
like,
duck him in the mud.
Yeah, or be like, I told you not to be talking to the devil, Shelby.
Yeah,
I can't think of a Scottish name.
Shelby.
Shelby, whatever.
Shelby's so Scottish.
Catherine.
Sure, why not? Spelled with a C. But yeah, like, I think nowadays, like, the Rudolph has a deformity part maybe feels a little bit weird to a lot of us because it's not a big deal anymore.
Well,
like, most of us know at least one person who has some, like, physical, seeable deformity.
Yeah.
And so, like, for, like, there is that, like, there are spots in the movie, and this is one of the reasons why this movie has become a classic and not, like, shunned for being insensitive.
Yeah.
Because you can see, like, everyone knows this movie is old as shit. There's no questioning the time frame or the plot, even if you don't know how old as shit this movie is. But at the same time, like, yes, everyone is a dick to Rudolph, but you kind of give it a pass because that's the song. And then you kind of give Donner's dad a pass, too, mostly because you're like, yeah, well, I don't know how else they were going to write him. Like, if he was nice, it wouldn't have been Rudolph.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of, it is what it is.
It's a story of morality. And
it is.
I think the people who have tried canceling Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the past they don't understand the story. They're just looking at the very negative aspects of it.
Yes, and especially the first half of the movie. And there's the argument of like, oh, he was only loved once he was useful. I wouldn't say that. I mean, he came back and like everyone had gone out looking for him. So like this movie does have like heart and compassion. It just the first couple minutes you're like, I could see how like a very...
Yeah, it's oversimplifying the moral of the story.
Yeah, very much so.
Or not even simplifying, just overlooking the moral of the story.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I actually have a question on this. Mm-hmm. Has Rudolph met any other reindeer outside of his family?
We can assume not.
Yeah. I'm guessing not because most of the people don't realize that, hey, Donner has a son.
Yeah, nobody knows Donner has a son, and nobody knows his nose screeches.
Yeah.
Which, like, the glowing part, I can see, like, hiding that pretty easily, but his nose like full on screeches at people. With
how open Santa is about this shit, I'm
surprised Santa hasn't like told everyone like,
exactly.
Hey, Donner has a weird ass
be
kid.
like, hey Blitzen, you see Donner's new kid?
This is what happens.
Fucking red-nosed freak over there.
Yeah, but like so the only explanation I possibly can think of is like there's a few lines from the narrator that makes it sound like deer don't get together until reindeer games season. Like everyone lives by themselves, isolated until it's time for reindeer games, and then they all come together.
Let the fighting commence.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, which is not how deer live. But you know, that's fine. It's whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care.
And so before reindeer games, we have elf practice, which that whole song is just the elves.
Telling you what elves do.
And how grateful they are at being Santa's elves.
Yes. And it is Mrs. Claus being the sweet, compassionate woman that she is. And being like, y'all sound great. I love it. It was beautiful. And Santa's just a dick to everyone.
Yeah, he's like, no, that was bad. Something's wrong. And then he's like, or no, he's not even wrong. He doesn't even say something's wrong. He's more like,
fix it.
He's like, that ain't shit. I'm out. Peace.
I got places to be. I want to go to reindeer game practice.
Exactly. And they blame all of the screw up on Hermie.
Yeah, because Herbie didn't come to practice, so the tenor section was weak. Which I would like to remind the head elf, sir, that one of your elves fell into your drum. Yeah. And I think that might be your problem. Also, the drum magically heals itself halfway through. And my musical husband would like to remind everyone that is not what those instruments sound like.
God damn it, Brian.
It's really hard to watch, like, orchestra music with him.
It's hard to watch anything with any kind of music with him.
It is. But this one specifically was a lot of cringing and a lot of, like, that's not what a French horn sounds like.
Man, I need to make him watch Tokyo Tribes.
He would implode.
Tokyo Tribes and The Happiness of the Katakuris, because that is, like, those are, like, the two least musicals I know. One
of his family's favorite pastimes is to send pictures of fake staff music where the notes don't match the words or they don't make sense or it's written really dumb. And then the entire like clan of them all just like goes on a rant about how stupid the music is. It's a thing. It's adorable. Yes. But yeah, this was Brian's least favorite song.
Good. I'm glad you tortured him a little bit. Someone else has to suffer besides us. And so, why is Hermie missing?
Because Herbie made his own toys.
To practice dentistry on.
But to give him some leeway, he did attempt to, like, combine the two things. Like, he did attempt to be like, look, I know I'm not a good elf, but, like, what if there was dentist toys? Then I would be good at it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of, like, shot him down because all of their other dolls do other dumb shit, like pee themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what is Hermie's solution to this?
Fuck shit, I'm leaving.
Yep. Peace.
Honestly,
he pulls a Santa Claus on all of them.
he pulls a Santa. And, like, good on him for taking his one dentist book, no food, no clothes. He's just going out into the Arctic Circle by himself.
Yeah.
With his book.
Yep. And so, we now cut to the reindeer games.
Which are...
It's just, it feels like old school football practice in movies.
It is straight up old school football practice. The girls are not allowed, but they are there to make doe eyes at people.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I actually did a little bit of looking on it because I found Wikipedia says it different than any other sources I've seen.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, reindeers are referred to in cow terms.
Sure.
But on Wikipedia, they're all does, fawns.
I think probably the American thought is they are a deer. We will call them deer names. And then, like, probably the correct translation. And, like, people who are actually in the industry are like, no, you dumbasses. This happens a lot with a lot of, like, small industries. Like, the logging companies comes to my mind a lot.
Okay.
Lumberjacks are not what you think they are.
No.
But they are. But they're not.
No.
It's a lot of weird terminology like that.
Yeah.
The movie calls them does and bucks, so that's what they are now.
Yeah. And so Rudolph is there making friends with...
Yeah, he's made a friend already for being the weird hermit kid. Good for him.
Fireball and Clarice.
Yeah, Clarice, the only doe with a bow and long-ass eyelashes, which, arguably, that is weird. Why are her eyelashes so long?
And the other thing, too, is not only are they
They make fun of Rudolph for his nose.
No, they don't make fun of him for his... Well, they do mention his nose, but they make fun of him for his voice, that he sounds funny now.
He does. And, like, something my husband brought to the attention is after the, like, nose cap is removed, he still has a small lisp.
Yeah.
And so my husband's like, he doesn't sound any different. He's just not screeching anymore.
Yeah. And, so his fake nose falls off. Red Fireball and everyone freaks out because they're horrified of him.
They've seen a full-on demon.
Yeah, it's like in a horror film when you see where the characters see the
demon
they
clown.
see Leatherface for the first time or something.
Yes, it is very much like that. And it's like he had just done the best at reindeer games as anyone else probably ever has done. And then immediately they're like, frick you. No, stay away. Keep your weird red-nosed disease over there.
Yeah. Yeah. They treat him like the red-headed stepchild. He is literally the red-nosed stepchild,
They
though.
do. The only one who's nice to him is Clarice, who's like, at least you don't sound as dumb now.
Yeah, she's like, that's not a big deal. But then her dad's like, no.
No
will not
woman
be
in my house.
You shall not carry on the red-nosed freak gene.
But at the same time, like, she has weird eyelash disease. Like, they're meant for each other.
Yeah. And so Rudolph runs off, and he runs into none other than Hermie hiding in a snowbank. And they both decide to run off together and become independent. Rudolph, who we know is at least a few months old at this point.
He's like 6 months old at best.
Yeah.
Two literal children have run off together, and the only thing they brought with them is a book on dentistry.
Yep. And at this point, the world is a cruel bitch mother to them.
Yes.
They are constantly on their run because, one, there's inclement weather, but also
Rudolph's
the abominable creature of the north is attracted by the red light.
And, yeah, they make it sound like Rudolph's nose is like...
The laser pointer for a cat.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cat laser pointer, or like me and a cheeseburger at 2 a.m. Like, I will drive miles for that shit. So will the abominable snowman. He coming for him.
Interesting.
I love cheeseburgers.
I do
but
too.
Specifically between the hours of 9 p.m. and like 3 a.m. That's like prime cheeseburger time.
And see, I'm that weirdo who wishes, like, if I wanted to go get like a McDonald's cheeseburger, that they serve them at 9 a.m. because
I understand.
That's when I'm out and about doing stuff.
That's when I want a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
So they grow up over the like 2 months that they're out.
Well,
running around.
That's like way down the line. We're still in like or adolescent Rudolph. Because as they're running away, they after their first night, they meet Yukon Cornelius.
Bless him.
Who is obsessed with silver and gold.
Yes, and the way he finds silver and gold, as the current cut of the movie depicts, is he throws his pickaxe up in the air. It land on the ground. He pick it up, he sniff it, he lick it, and he says nothing. Now, this is weird because the original cut of the movie made it clear that he's not actually looking for silver and gold. He's looking for peppermint.
Oh.
Peppermint is apparently in the North Pole mined like coal and silver and gold. But the way the movie has been now cut down to, and they originally cut out the very end scene where he mentions peppermint, like briefly mentions it, like one word.
Well, no, it is mentioned in the movie because I have it in my notes.
Yeah. So but there was a point during one of the runs of this where they cut that out too. And so everyone for a while just thought Cornelius was like real weird and thought that you could find silver and gold by sniffing and licking a pickaxe. I mean, he's still real weird, but like now it makes a little more sense.
I've seen Chuck Norris push up, smell the ground, and eat the dirt, and I know that a plane crashed there.
This is true. Yeah, I have seen many an old TV show where like MacGyver. No, that's not how this works. But yeah, so to help explain a little bit, because no one needs to watch all the versions of this movie. That is what he's doing. He's looking for peppermint, but he keeps calling it silver and gold throughout the whole movie.
Interesting. So now we get the Silver and Gold song. Yes,
which is arguably one of the classics that came out of this song. This song is played by itself on the radio all the time.
Yeah. And so because of Rudolph's deformity, they are on the run because the abominable snowman of the north is closing in on them, but Cornelius knows the way out because the monster can't swim.
Monster can't swim! And also, I would like to briefly point out the multiple scenes of the abominable snowman that are very Godzilla-esque in nature. There's a lot of like creeping over the mountain range and screaming at the camera in Godzilla-esque screams.
And the monster is kind of King Kong-like.
It is a little King Kong-y. Yeah, it's especially like after kind of recently watching the original Godzilla, like it's got the vibes, man.
Yeah.
If not, like, someone watched it themselves and was like, I want that in my movie.
Well, I have a little bit about that in my impact and legacy of the movie, so so I'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
So as they drift into the night on the iceberg, we're cut back to Donner, who feels bad.
He finally feels bad for being a total dick to his son. And
goes off searching for him after
telling his wife that ain't no woman going outside.
And then Clarice comes in and she's like, I miss him, even though I've known him for like 2 minutes. So she and Donner's wife go
off as well, which, you know, like, good for them.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do when looking for your kid.
Yep.
As a deer in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. And so Rudolph and the gang drift into a fog that is thicker than peanut butter.
Which I like this phrase. That's cute.
Yeah, because Rudolph corrects him and he's like, we got our own phrases, son.
Yes. Also, I'd like to mention that for those of you who bother, they did actually make the dogs for Cornelius. They modeled them after real and very distinctive like dog breeds, which is adorable. None of them are appropriate for pulling a sleigh except one of them. And even then, it's not really a pulling dog.
Nice.
They are all the wrong dog. One of them is a poodle. Just straight up a black poodle.
It's perfect because they're all misfits.
Even the dogs are misfits.
That is a nice little touch
It is a cute touch. The dogs are adorable.
Yeah. And so, speaking of misfits,
yes,
through the peanut butter fog, they land upon the island of misfit toys guarded by a Charlie in the box. And I immediately thought of my stupid S-cat.
Yes.
In a box.
Can we please dress up Charlie as...
Actually,
box next year.
I have like elf costumes and stuff for them.
There you go.
I will add that. I will post something about that.
Yes, please put your cats in hats.
My mom hates them. I have hats for my cats because my mom hates them.
But they're so cute. They look so sad.
Yes, Charlie. They barely stay on Charlie.
They put up with it just long enough for a photo.
Barely. Half the time Charlie's got his head cocked. But yeah, so they land on the Isle of Misfit Toys. Which, by the way, the elves give Hermie shit for not wanting to be a dentist, but who the hell made these toys?
Apparently Hermie.
I don't think it was Hermie.
No, it's gotta be some other, like, dumbass elf. Because, like, there's a lot of toys on this island that...
Yeah.
With the exception of one. There's one toy on this island, and I can't remember exactly which one it is. There's only one that, like, we don't know for sure what's wrong with it, because it looks fine, so it's gotta be named something stupid.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, none of them are that bad.
No.
Like,
it's just someone put square wheels on a train.
Now it's a slidey train.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, apparently Santa Claus's workshop's quality control is real high. Because, like, one of them's just an elephant with pink spots or something like that. Like, that's not a problem. That's cute.
No. Today, that'd be a Pokemon.
Today, that would be a Dumbo reference.
It's been a long time since I've seen Dumbo.
It's exactly like you remember it. Don't worry.
Okay. So... Rudolph and gang is rejected from staying on the island because despite them being misfits, they are alive. But the toys are not, even though they can talk.
Which kind of makes you wonder about the magic required around the Arctic Circle. Like, are there spots where the toys are alive and that's why they're stuck on the island?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I was thinking, is it like Toy Story or like...
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe it's Toy Story logic? But then, like, they're making the toys. Like, that seems weird to be sentient and being made.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, some obscure logic says because you're not a toy, you can't live here, but also the toys can't leave.
Yeah, it's weird. But it's cute.
Yeah, it's adorable.
Yeah.
And we don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real, there's not enough room in this story to elaborate anymore.
Exactly. And that's the nice thing is, like, it's just done so quickly.
Yeah, like, honestly, half the time I forget the Island of Misfit Toys is even in this movie.
Yeah. And so, after this, Rudolph martyrs himself because...
because the abominable snowman is out there, damn it.
He does not want to put his friends in danger. It's sweet.
It is sweet, but at the same time, you dumbass.
Yeah, safety in numbers. He's like... there are so many things, like, if this was a horror film...
Oh, yeah, no. Rudolph would either be the killer... or dead.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say
Hermie would be the
Hermie
killer.
would be the killer.
Hermie would be the killer.
Yeah.
Or he'd be the secret killer who kills the killer.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so Rudolph keeps getting rejected by everyone he encounters.
So it's time to live by himself.
Yeah.
Find himself, be his own man.
Until he quickly decides to stop running from his problems because now he is an adult.
And there is a brief explanation as why he does this. The narrator explains that as you grow up, you understand bits about your life. So in other words, puberty.
Yeah.
Puberty made him go, wow, that was dumb, I'm going home.
I'm Miss Clarice in a whole new type of reason now.
Also, I'm real tired of eating this white snow. I'm going home.
Yes. And so he returns only to find that everyone he loves and cares about has been
two people
missing for months because they went out to try and find him. And of course,
there's only one place they could be.
The abominable snowman's cave.
We're not going to explain to you why that timeline logic makes sense, just it does.
Yeah.
Accept it.
And Rudolph gets his ass kicked.
He does, which I appreciate because, let's be real here, he is a fucking deer.
Yeah.
And it's an abominable snowman who's the size of a mountain range.
Yeah. And so what's their goal? Is they're going to call the monster out.
Yeah, the only thing that could possibly lure a monster out more than Rudolph's red laser pointer nose. A piggy.
Pork.
Sweet, sweet piggies.
I do love pork, though.
I do, too. I don't know if I'd run out of a cave because someone goes, oink, 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 oink.
Hey, get me a good schnitzel out there. Yeah.
I've seen a full-grown pig. I ain't fucking with that shit. They're huge.
I mean, he's a giant-ass snowman.
That's true. If I was the size of the giant-ass snowman, I guess I wouldn't care.
Yeah. And so they try knocking him out. Cornelius goes in to rescue them. But who should appear in the doorway again? The abominable snowman of the north.
Bum, bum, bum.
But his teeth have been removed, and this is where Hermie is a fucking psychopath.
Yeah, Hermie just took all of his teeth out.
Without anesthesia, and the last time I saw something like that was a Serbian film.
Yeah, as someone who's had multiple teeth removed, not just like oh, I had my wisdom teeth removed. I've had a lot of teeth removed for various reasons. No thank you, sir, you weird-ass psychopath.
Yeah.
This poor monster.
Yeah.
Now he's gummy. What's he gonna eat? Clearly his diet is meat.
Nothing. He's gonna starve to death.
He's gonna starve
Hermie
to death.
is a psychopath.
Hermie apparently attempted to kill him by removing his teeth to starve the thing to death.
Yeah, exactly.
Or give him a weird infection.
This is why Hermie is would be the serial killer if this was a horror film.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
But because this is a children's movie and no one thought like this apparently in the 1930s.
Yeah. Which is why we ruin children's movies on this podcast.
Yeah, this is true. But because no one thought about that at the time in the 1960s, this was not apparently a thing that anyone had to worry about or think about. So this is perfectly fine and normal. And
it's like Tom and Jerry cartoon violence.
Yeah, and so because it's now Tom and Jerry level cartoon, Cornelius thinks to himself he can take the beast and pushes him and himself over the cliff.
And all his dogs off the cliff too.
Because the dogs will go wherever that man goes.
Yep.
Bless their little poofy hearts.
So they rush back to Christmas Town now. Everyone suddenly accepts Rudolph and Hermie for who they are.
Yes.
Because they've missed them. They have... in a way... Well, so... Okay, here's...
They had time to reflect on how much of an asshole they were.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is, like, it's not up until he's useful. They've already accepted him back.
Yeah, which is why I like this version of Rudolph. Because there are other versions of Rudolph, and they usually condense it down so far that everyone only likes him once he's back. I mean, that's kind of how the song plays out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's made clear that everyone realizes while these guys have been gone and presumed dead, that maybe we were a little harsh, not very understanding, and like, yeah, maybe we do need a dentist actually.
Yeah. And so the elves start singing again because Christmas is back in spirit. Everyone's back. Santa's bitching about their singing again.
Yeah, but at least Santa's finally listened to his wife and ate some goddamn food, even though his food was disgustingly gray throughout this whole movie.
Yeah, but, I mean, what is she feeding him, though? Because, like, he fattens up so quickly.
I worry about Mrs. Claus's cooking.
I actually have I have a side theory about this, in a little bit.
Okay.
So, at this point, the snow's coming in. They might not be able to take off. Christmas may be canceled.
Christmas is ruined.
And Rudolph is to the rescue. Starts annoying Santa with his nose right away. But then it's like, oh, wait.
What a good idea that I totally have had by myself.
It'll shine through the light. But at the same time as they're getting ready, Yukon shows back up with the abominable snowman.
Which he lovingly calls the Bumble.
The Bumble.
But don't worry, this is a reformed Bumble. Look what he can do.
He can put his star on a tree.
Without a step stool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also, Yukon has found a peppermint mine.
Yes. He's finally found the thing that he was looking for too. And it was also in Christmas Town. How convenient.
So not only is Yukon and everyone saved, Christmas is saved.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's the movie.
Yeah, that's the whole movie.
My little side tangent started off with Mrs. Claus feeding him and him getting super fat real quick, or Santa Claus getting real quick.
Santa Claus gains weight real easy.
And Yukon finding a peppermint mine. Mm-hmm. Is this some, like, branch of the Willy Wonka factory?
Oh. Is Willy Wonka secretly Santa Claus's children?
Or, thought on this, because only good things seem to happen in the North Pole, everything works out well. Mm-hmm. What if the Oompa Loompas are South Pole elves?
Ooh. No, they can't be, because unfortunately in the original they do explain what an actual Oompa Loompa is. And they come from Africa. Because at the time the book was written, it was perfectly fine to be really weird about race in Africa.
Which... By the way, I realized, because I'm back to last podcast on the left's covering of the Mormon.
Oh, yes.
Religion. I realized why I had that advertisement to teach the Mormons why the Native Americans are truly descendants of Israel.
Oh, yeah.
There's the radio station's from Missouri.
Yes, it is.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. We have some weird radio down here if you care to listen.
No.
Not recommended unless you're real bored.
No. But yeah, I mean, I like that theory. Without the racist connotations of the original Willy Wonka, I like to think that Oompa Loompas are South Pole elves, and Willy Wonka's Krampus. Yeah!
Is he? I kind of like to think that he's maybe like their child, because like clearly Santa is not cooking for himself. He's not making candy. He's not doing any of that. But he also can like lose weight instantly.
And Willy Wonka's constantly skinny despite owning a candy factory.
And only eating candy as far as any of us can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rivers of chocolate, goddammit.
I am not wrong on this.
I like your theory.
I'll have to do some more digging because it's been a while since I've seen Willy Wonka, to be honest. But...
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, it's a TV movie.
It's a TV movie, but it's also not, like, there's some TV movies, especially kids' TV movies, that are maybe 30 minutes, pushing it with the ads built in. We've seen them. We know them.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Shrek.
Oh, boy. Yes.
Shrek the Halls. But this one is, I argue, the perfect length.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I don't want to watch a whole movie on TV. I don't want to sit through the ads.
Yeah.
It's by the time the like second half of the movie starts, I've still got another hour left of ads to watch, and I'm bored. I'm tired.
Yeah.
And it will pull a normal hour and a half long movie out to 2 hours, if not more.
Yeah, and like me going without ads for years, when they now show up when I watch Crunchyroll or YouTube, they're all so
obnoxious.
Obnoxious.
Yeah.
Like they're self-involved and too important. Like, there's been a bunch of commercials out where it's like, what will you do with your life? What will you achieve?
Yeah.
Pepsi.
Yes.
Yeah, it's shit like that.
Yeah, and
or it's like the recent one that really annoyed me was bunch of people going out and voting. It was a Levi Jeans commercial.
Of course.
It's so fucking stupid.
Well, and I think we've reached a weird point in advertisement in history where when this movie originally came out, ads weren't much of a thing. Things were done by the company who wanted the ad.
Exactly.
And it's common on radio too. Most of the radio shows that I listen to, which are arguably much too old for me, but all of them are sponsored by fill in blank company here.
If you don't smoke Marlboro, you're a red-nosed freak like Rudolph.
This episode of Sherlock Holmes brought to you by Pettridge Farms, makers of fine wine.
Yes.
I have looked it up. They are no longer in business. I'm very sad. Because I was like, I'll drink Pettridge Farms.
But when it was simple, it was about the product.
That's actually part of their ad.
Yeah. Well,
but we've reached a point in consumerism and that everyone knows exactly what is happening when they are shown an ad. There's not a single person left who can even be remotely tricked into thinking that this company is just trying to give you something good.
Yeah, you can't just gloss over the quickly said side effects of this drug.
Or fill in anything shown on TV anymore. Yeah, like we've reached a point in consumerism where the ads have gotten heavily aggressive because everyone knows that they're ads, but also like we also have reached a point where we have been told over and over and over again that this is the only way that you're going to get free TV.
Yeah. Which
isn't true because I paid for DirecTV, goddammit.
Yeah.
Well, but not anymore. But like it's become part of watching anything on TV or arguably online or anything, and it's to the point where people, like, it used to be like, oh, it's a quick commercial break. I got 2 minutes to go get popcorn and a drink. I'll be right back. But they know that you're going to do that. So now the ads take longer, or they're placed at a different spot.
Or their sound balancing is louder than the rest of the television programming.
It is, in fact, louder than the rest of the television, which is someone who can't hear the television anyway is real fucking annoying.
Yeah. So we can say we've put on the sunglasses from They Live.
Yes.
Another horror movie reference.
Very true. And so I appreciate the condensity of Rudolph's story, and even with the modern extra long advertisements, we've reached like the max amount of ads, I think.
Yeah.
It's still not that long.
No.
But it's also not so short that I feel like I'm watching a child's movie.
Exactly.
It feels like a true movie, even for what it is.
Yeah. And so we talked about the ads enough. I kind of want to go into like the legacy and impact that this movie had because
this movie did a lot.
Yeah, because it like many of the movies you've suggested, because I didn't grow up with this really.
Oh, sure.
I actually had to do a little bit more digging and racking my parents' brains for some of this stuff. But like I said previously, this was set during, there was only 3 networks on TV at the time.
Yes.
also, this movie set the precedent for holiday specials and Christmas tradition centered around the television.
Yes.
Because...
arguably paving the way for Hallmark Channel.
Yeah, well, like my mom, she told me that she doesn't remember never not watching this.
Yes.
At all.
And I don't think she is even remotely alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think pretty much everyone who's alive at this point, including our grandparents, can't remember a time where Rudolph wasn't a staple.
Yeah. And then, like, on the other side of things, because my dad, when he was about the age I would have started watching this, he was living in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And so he doesn't remember watching it because they had German television on.
Oh, sure.
And my parents also grew up in the age where you played outside until the streetlights came on, or you were reading a book. You had one television.
And maybe you got to watch Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, exactly. It was special time for the family, whereas now it's just a part of life.
Yeah, and now there's also like, I'm going to go watch my show.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't my show back in the day. If it was on TV, it was for everybody. And if you're going to watch TV, you watch it as a family. Yeah,
and on top of that, like, I vaguely knew about this from That 70s Show.
Oh,
where the episode where Kelso wants to go watch it, and all his friends are giving him shit.
Yes.
But, like, one thing my mom mentioned that I wasn't super aware about is that all these kinds of specials were advertised weeks in advance.
Oh, yeah.
And people, like, would try and schedule around them as best they could. And if for some reason you had a concert or band rehearsal that night...
Yep.
Why didn't they plan around it? Like,
yeah, no, and it wasn't just like, oh, it was advertised on TV, which is how everything is done now. There was books sent in the mail that had when your local station was going to air everything for a month or so, or maybe even longer, depending on where you lived. And yeah, you set your schedule around it, like, to the point of, like, I have to leave school so I can catch my show.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of extreme, but not that much. I remember, like, there were points where, like, as a family, we all wanted to watch, like, America's Funniest Home Videos. It only came on a certain day and at a certain time, and that was the only one we were going to watch. Yeah. And we didn't DVR a whole lot of stuff.
Well, and I think part of the changes, and we're at an age where we've had everything. Like, I was looking at a chart of where generations actually fall. Yeah. And, like, we are on the cusp of, we grew up with televisions, but we had, like, in the States, I think we had, like, 20-some channels when I first moved to Germany, and then when we were in Germany, we had 7 channels.
Yeah, and I think where I lived, like, we maybe got 5 channels, but only 3 of them came in well. Yeah. And so, like, I watched Bob Ross.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the changes we've seen is, one, we've seen the growth of networks where there are channels dedicated to these niche views. Like,
yeah, like the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the HGTV channel. And on top of that, like, we're also at a weird generation where, like, yeah, we remember just having antenna TV. Yeah. Because at the time, cable TV was really expensive. And maybe your friend had it, but most people didn't. Yeah. And then, like, about middle school, it got less expensive. And everybody had Dish for a while. And, like, it wasn't the Dish that we know today. There was maybe 200 channels of Dish, and that felt like an exorbitant amount, and how could you ever watch all that TV? Yeah. We only watched 3 channels.
and now look at it. We have multiple streaming services that...
Yeah, to the point where, like, I don't know a whole lot of people who still have Dish or cable. Yeah. My parents do, but that's mostly because they have specific shows and channels that they watch, and that's the only way they can get them.
Yeah. No, and for me, I think, like, especially with this enlarging of the Christmas season, now it being 3 to 4 months.
The Christmas year, you mean?
For me, it has deteriorated the spirit of the holiday for me quite a bit, because, like, even though you and I love Halloween and horror films, and we both watch horror films throughout the year.
Yeah, but there's a special time in Halloween to watch them.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure.
But we don't encroach and force the Halloween ideas on.
Oh, yeah, no, I have a skull shirt that is very Halloween. I wear it all year round. But, like, I wouldn't be upset if, like, a friend was like, I'm not wearing my Halloween shirt the rest of the year. Or, like, costumes. Or, I will make a Halloween costume year round. Yeah. But I also put, like, half of it away for cosplay later. But that's, not most people do that. But, like, I don't care. Like, if someone on my work team, like, our office is really into Halloween. Yes. We love to decorate. We love to have costume contests. And, like, people, like, will spend a whole week putting stuff together. But I don't think anyone at least not most, of the people in our office who are like us, who are hella Halloween lovers. If someone else on our team is like, I'm not into Halloween, it's like, okay, can I decorate your desk for you?
Yeah.
At like stretching it, because like when I say we decorate, I mean like we decorate. Like a whole section turned into Hogwarts level decoration.
Yeah, then there's who's ever on the team with me, I'm lazy. I don't...
Yeah, which, like...
Yeah.
And, like, there's always, like, that level of, like, I understand that not everyone's gonna go as hardcore as I am to decorate my desk for Halloween.
But I'm willing to help decorate.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the standard. I wish Christmas could be a little bit more like that, because I like Christmas. It's not my favorite, but I like Christmas. But when Christmas starts in September... I don't feel Christmas spirit.
No, exactly.
I just feel tired.
Yeah, because it's so in your face now that it's draining. And so, for some people, that's great for them.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know.
Which, wrapping it back around to this show, one of the things that, and granted, not all TV has gotten this way, but one of the things that I still appreciate about these made-for-TV movies that are specifically for Christmas is most of them don't, like, you could find them. But most of them don't actually start airing until December 1st, because all of these networks have their schedule planned out for decades ahead of time. They know exactly when they're going to air all of these holiday movies, and it's going to be just these movies for the next 25 days, if not a little longer, but it usually doesn't truly, like, the heavy hitting doesn't start until December 1st, because I think ABC and CBS both have, like, the like Deck the Halls style thing where like they play a different movie every day, but they play the same one for the entire day. And I think streaming services do a good job with that too, is they don't advertise holiday movies until like the week before. Yeah, like if I wanted to, I could watch any of the holiday specials on Amazon probably year round. Granted, they do pick up some licenses for certain holidays. We've seen it, we know it. Yeah. We've watched the horror movies Influx and then Deflux on all of the platforms. But at the same time, like, I'm not advertised the Christmas Prince until December on Netflix. Yeah. Which is nice, because that's when it feels like I want to bother to watch that stupid Hallmark movie anyway. Exactly. So, but a little bit back to the movie and like why this movie is so special. For me, and as we've talked about previously, and as I heard from a lot of the interviews with directors, producers, and other animators, is that everything felt physically to them. Like you could reach out and grab it. Yeah. And I think there's still that special handcrafted movement to it. Oh, for sure. Where we don't really see that anymore, because like there's a few studios who are still doing it, and they stand out from the rest of the... Unfortunately, they're lumped in with the animation. Yeah. Which is kind of fair. Yes, they are in a way an animation, but they are not animation in the standard sense. They are their own thing. It is stop motion. It is claymation. Yeah. Well, and honestly, there's not a ton of studios who are making anything big anymore. We've got a handful that do, and they stick out, and they get a lot of praise and a lot of criticism, but if they're the only one doing it, there's not a whole lot of room for development. Well, and like for me, it felt like, specifically children's-based movies, I immediately thought of Toy Story, because that was truly our first 3D animated movie, so there was something special to it. Oh, for sure. And even like the rigidity felt special. Yeah. But the limitations felt legitimate. And maybe a better example is a movie that I know a lot of people don't remember or haven't seen, Small Soldiers. Oh, yeah. That for me is probably the closest thing I have to this as a kid. Yeah. And I think Nightmare Before Christmas too, but that felt like a magical world, whereas that Small Soldiers feels very much like toys. It feels tangible. Yeah, or like the Indian in the Cupboard. Yeah, Indian in the Cupboard's a really good example. Yeah. And I think as... And we touched on this a little bit with the retouching and the reanimation of stuff in recent years. I think a lot of people have started to notice. Yeah. And there has been a desire to see more actual physically made things before. And I think the desire to see those things move from small indie platforms to big screens is something that we're starting to really like see true movement behind, not just from the audience, but from companies. but I don't think we've quite reached a point where those companies can justify saying, like, yeah, you can spend years and a arguably big budget to make a short movie that we don't know is going to be successful.
Yeah.
Which is kind of too bad, because it's clear that the love of this sort of stuff is there.
Well, and there's something to that, too. I really latched on to the Chiodo brothers in this. Mm-hmm. Something they mentioned is that modern animation is real but fake, but stop animation is fake but also physically real.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people connect really strongly with claymation, even the ones that are the modern ones that are much more fluid and there's a lot more frames to them and a lot more movement to them. I think a lot of people still connect with it, even Nightmare Before Christmas, which is arguably the most animated style of claymation.
Yeah.
Where the whole world is built up to an excess, which is part of why people love it. It's an entire environment. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels very flushed out.
Yeah.
But there is still that tangible quality to it. There's still that clay feel that you can almost feel it as you watch it.
Well, and it also inspired a lot of makers.
Yeah, it does.
Specifically, the reason I bring up the Chiodo brothers is because they're one of my favorite special effects artists. People will know them more from their other works, such as they did the special effects for the Critters franchise. One of my currently new favorites, Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
A delight.
Team America World Police.
Yes.
And as well, they were the stop animation supervisors for Elf.
Yes.
That's probably what most people know them from. Is that.
I think so.
Another Christmas movie.
Another delightful Christmas music.
Also, you brought up that there's that lack of handmade animation. I haven't watched it yet, but I know the Chiodo brothers did a stop animation for Netflix, a Christmas special.
Oh, fun.
So
like it. Oh, hi.
Shut up, Charlie, in a box. I will put you in a box.
He says I would like that. I'm cat. But yeah, and I think there's also something to the whole inspiring your audience. I think a lot of films that people hold dear to them have either inspired them with their storytelling ability and you wanting to write something or create something similar, or like part of the reason so many people love Studio Ghibli films is because once you're done watching it, you feel like I want to draw something. I want to paint something. Yeah. It gives you that inspiration because even though you probably cannot paint to the level of background that they can or create the characters in that refinedness that they do, it still feels something tangible. It still feels like something, even if you're not as good as that, like, it's still something that you feel like you could connect with. And claymation does the same thing. A lot of people feel inspired to even try polymer clay with it or break out Play-Doh, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
Whereas we keep seeing, especially in the non-live action world, everything moving more and more digital, and it's to the point where, like, even traditionally hand-drawn stuff like anime has reached a point where it's all CGI'd, to the point where, like, yeah, sometimes it works, but, like, does it work to the point where, like, you're inspiring people to create?
Yeah.
And for some things, that's not the point. For some movies, that's not the point. But I think part of the reason why Rudolph and this studio has become such a classic is because it feels so real and it feels like you can connect with it so easily.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Speaking about the physicality of this movie, there are some sad notes on the puppets.
There are.
As you mentioned, because people didn't know that how iconic and influential this film would be, as many of these types of films are.
Yeah.
The puppets were used in production, but were not that were used in production were not preserved.
No.
I guess in 2007, Rankin had the original Rudolph figure. 9 of the original puppets, including Santa and young Rudolph, were given to a secretary who gave them to other family members.
They were all eventually just...
Of those, 7 of them were discarded.
Yeah, so we're down to just Rudolph and Santa. And the funny thing is all of them were considered completely lost up until 2005.
Yeah.
When they were found on the show Antique Roadshow.
Yep.
Which I both love and hate that show because stuff like this does happen.
Yeah.
Like, you find these amazing dolls. I think originally on the show he was like, oh, maybe $8,000 is what you'd get at auction for them. they went for a lot more than that. I think it's like 300.
Yeah, they sold for a lot.
They sold for a lot more, but like also that show is so dry.
Oh yeah,
it's so fucking dry.
But
you can watch all of it on YouTube.
It's perfect for me though because
I
love that shit.
Oh, me too. I watch it repetitively, and every time I watch it, I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
But I love it. But so yeah, we're down to just the 2. But thankfully, they were picked up by someone who did actually know what they were and what they meant, and had them restored as best he could.
Yep. And in 2007, they were almost guaranteed authentic.
Yeah.
During the restoration process by Screen Novelties, because when they were looking over them, they mentioned in the special features of the DVD, because they were like, "Are these really true or not?"
Yeah.
And they removed like one of the legs, and like it was stuffed with like Japanese or lined with Japanese newspaper, and they're like,
"Yeah, it's probably
this is probably legit. At least this one."
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool because they were able to deconstruct and figure out how they made these.
Yeah, because
move.
Yeah, especially like Rudolph, there's so many advances that have been made in this industry that nobody really does claymation and stop animation like this.
Yeah.
So like he has a hole in his side they'd like literally just stick him on a stick and be like, all right, now fly.
Yeah, exactly. Because they couldn't edit out the green screen that they can now. Like, they had to take shots cleverly.
Yeah, so there was a lot of puppetry that we just wouldn't do anymore. Like we mentioned, Rudolph is just made out of wood for the most part. Yeah. Nobody does that. No. Like, that's hard to work with. You can't remake it. You can't mold it into different shapes if you want.
Like, I think it was, because the other one I think they have is Cornelius. And they were able to figure out that his head was just a piece of wood that they had carved and painted. So if they needed a new one, they just carved and painted it.
Do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one does that. But it's cool to see that someone at some point did.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting.
Very.
But on top of that, Rudolph has inspired, as we'd like to think that classics don't do this.
Oh, they do.
So many sequels. The only ones I looked into were actual Rankin and Bass.
Fair.
They have like 5 different ones. The first one was in 1976, Rudolph's Shiny New Year. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do a little more research on this, but I ran out of time. Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July in 1979.
Yes.
I wanted to do some looking into on like the encroachment of this holiday.
I think this is kind of the start of it, but also at the same time, the idea of Christmas in July is pretty old. Yeah. And I think originally it was more of like it comes out of the question of like, what does Santa do during the summer? And so the whole vibe of Santa surfing in that weird one stripy piece bathing suit that everyone draws him in. You've seen it. It's got the suspenders and then it like cuts off at the thigh. It's red and white.
I'm sure I've seen it.
It's always on the surfing Santa or lounging on the beach Santa or slightly too burnt Santa. There's always like been some like thought of
tchotchke.
Yeah, it's always been some thought as to what Santa does. I think we've just reached a point where now stores feel justified.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I didn't realize how recent some of these sequels were either, because we had Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Island of Misfit Toys in 2001.
I missed that one.
The one you mentioned, where they tried faithfully reconstructing / updating with new techniques, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the 4D attraction, which is a 10-minute snippet.
It's a cute idea, and clearly the people who worked on it are really passionate about it, and they're trying their best to like make something that's their own, but also be incredibly faithful and kind to the original source. It's hard to recreate something like a claymation figure. Yeah. Especially a hand wooden cut claymation figure, apparently. So I wouldn't go into it with like rose tinted glasses, but go in with a fun like interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice little side note.
It is a nice side note, and I like what they're attempting to do. Yeah. I think it's kind of cool. And
our most recent sequel or adaptation is Team Rudolph in the Reindeer Games in 2018.
I would skip that one if you haven't seen it yet.
It's on the DVD of most of them. It's an abridged version.
It's fine.
It's basically the poem.
Yes.
Yeah. And then on top of that, there was a cash grab in 2010 with a
yes, there was
Wii and Nintendo DS game that I looked up the play of it. your standard shovelware mini games, and it
is exactly what you think it is.
It looks like garbage.
It is garbage.
Yeah.
But Rudolph themed garbage.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's crazy that a movie from the 60s is still
producing things.
Yeah.
No, like honestly, it is really impressive, and
it hasn't evolved. Like
there's nothing new.
Yeah.
There's not new, unlike Shrek, which arguably the story of Shrek is ongoing. Like, even if the first Shrek had ended and they just kind of like kept remaking it like they've done with Rudolph, like, you could argue that, like, of course you're going to question what Shrek does in the future. Like, he's got a girlfriend now, / they're married. What about Donkey and the weird dragon thing? What about, like, are they a thing? You don't question Rudolph.
No.
I don't care what Rudolph does in the future. It's probably the exact same thing his dad just did, only now it's Rudolph.
Well, he surpassed his dad.
He did, but, like, also he's going to just become his dad. Just hopefully a little less rude.
Yeah, just nicer.
Hopefully nicer, but it's going to be exactly the same. Like, that's just the circle of reindeer life, and no one cares about the next adventure of Rudolph. There's no question there, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs a sequel, even if they get one.
So many.
So many.
Dungeons and Dragons. I recently rewatched the first 2 movies.
Why?
Because I had them on DVD. I finally found the first one on DVD. I will say the first one is pretty fun.
The first one's fun, especially now, like, I think there's a resurgence in, like, watching other people play D&D instead of just playing it yourself.
Yeah.
There's quite a few podcasts that have gotten pretty big, and, like, there's a couple YouTube people who are really into it, and they've got quite the following. So now I think the D&D movies have, like, a little bit more of, like, oh, fun, look what it turns into. Except for the third one.
I can't find the third one here.
I mean, if you're gonna binge all of them, just do it. But, like, I would end with the first one.
Yes. So, but, anywho, back to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, side little tangent there. What are your final thoughts on the movie?
My thoughts kind of are the same going into this as it was coming out, which I don't get to say a whole lot. I usually rewatch a movie with trying to think of that question and what I would tell other people if they hadn't seen it, which, how have you not seen this movie? It's a good movie. It's a cute Christmas movie. It doesn't really have any specific Christmas leaning in any direction like the Hallmark movies tend to.
Yeah.
There's not a stereotrope other than, like, it's Rudolph. This is exactly what you think you're gonna get.
Yeah, it doesn't suffer from, like, a Disneyfication that we see.
No, and there's currently, like, a huge meme going around of what's your favorite Hallmark Christmas movie. It's the one about the white girl who's too busy at her job, and she goes back to her small hometown and meets the... all Hallmark movies are practically the same sort of trope.
Yeah.
Rudolph is exactly what you think it is, and remember it to be, and it's cute, and... it's just a good movie. Would I watch it outside of Christmas? Actually, yeah. Because of the claymation. If I was doing a study on claymation, I would bother to rewatch this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. As for someone who didn't necessarily grow up with these, like, I didn't watch it every year, and honestly, I probably haven't seen the movie since I was in middle school or elementary school.
Sure.
But it still holds up.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the thing is, I don't think you can say that with a lot of their stuff. Like,
no.
Honestly, the Halloween special we watched.
It's dated.
Yeah, it's dated. It's forgettable.
The jokes are dated. The impressions are dated. Like, it's not an all-star. That's for sure. It's fun if you get around to finding it or renting it. It is a good time. But it's more of a good time if you're into claymation.
Exactly.
Whereas this is just a good movie.
Exactly. I can see why it was a holiday tradition. And, you know, I mean, about me rewatching it, I can't say that I will, though. Like, at least not until I have nephews or nieces or it's just on in the background. This
is the perfect example of, like, I don't like to buy holiday movies specifically to put them on my TV.
Yeah.
I specifically like to buy movies that I have, like, a really strong connection with, like all the Harry Potters or all of the Lord of the Rings extendeds, that sort of stuff. Or, like, Pirates of the Caribbean, something that I know that I just can always, like, watch and find the same level of joy in.
Yeah.
I don't normally like to do that with holiday movies because I only want to watch them at Christmas. Yeah. And honestly, part of the joy of holiday movies is stumbling upon them on TV.
Yeah.
Or like being like, oh, this movie's coming on at 2:00. Everyone sit down and be quiet. I want to watch it.
Yeah.
That's part of the Rudolph experience. And so, yeah, would I say go out and buy this movie? No. It's not worth it.
It's aired every year.
Are the interviews on the back entertaining? Yeah, there's better.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not a breaker deal to get the special bonus features. Which normally you and me are like, that's why we buy movies. For the special features.
Or it's a movie I can't find. This one is so easy to find.
It's everywhere. I think sometimes it's even free.
Yeah. But I think, honestly, it kind of is a good movie, or it's a perfect movie for this year almost, just because...
It is.
It's nice, it's simple, it brings together... I think it's one of those movies that you can just sit down and enjoy together as a family unit where you haven't been able to for a while. Like,
yeah, and like if we end up having like a social bubble Christmas, I'll probably suggest to see what's on the channel that normally airs this, because it's either going to be this or it's going to be Santa Claus is Coming to the Town.
Yeah.
Both of which are solid things to have on in the background.
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably a nice change of pace from like me halting an entire family conversation about bringing up the fetishes of Albert Fish.
Yeah, and like there is interesting back history to this one. It's unlike some of the ones that are Christmas movies where there's nothing really to talk about with it.
Yeah.
There's lots of fun facts about Rudolph that you can trivia yourself to death with if you want.
Yeah, no, if you haven't seen it, give this movie a watch. That's all I can say. It's a holiday special.
And if you love claymation as much as I do, wow.
Oh, shush.
If you love claymation as much as I do, even if it's not Christmas, this is a solid watch just to study the claymation and how and like what they did well and what nowadays we probably wouldn't do anymore. Yeah. It's that from that point of view, it's very interesting.
Nope, I completely agree. So, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Insert screeching noise here.
Whee!
Thanks for listening.
Peace.